Hello, everyone. I have Richard Schwartz, professor, was a professor at College of Staten Island, author of Vegan Revolution, Saving Our World, Revitalizing Judaism. Oh, there it is. Beautiful, beautiful cover, Richard. That's gorgeous.
Thank you. Thank you.
And Judaism and Veganism, Judaism and Global Survival. Whoa, just wow, look at that. It's gorgeous. And you're in the middle of finishing a book right away. You're 89. There's no slowing you down, Richard. And you're finishing a book right now. Can you tell our listeners of what your book's about?
Yeah, this is scheduled to be published late summer. And it's a 20th anniversary edition of my book called Judaism and Global Survival. You can see these are two of the important things, Judaism and the idea, unfortunately, the world threatened as never before. So global survival is such a super important issue today.
Great. Yeah. You know, we are in a survival mode. And what I've discovered, so if we're talking spirituality, our children, our grandchildren, your great-grandchildren, children come into the world knowing, as Gabriel says, children come into the world as these sparks of light, and we will enter the kingdom again as children. And I'm talking about Dr. Gabriel Cousens, Rabbi Cousens, a dear friend of both of ours, my teacher, my mentor, my guru. And what he says is that if we're going to survive, we need to live the way children do, with such reverence and joy. Mm-hmm. So that's part of the spiritual message, isn't it, Richard, that we're all going to enter the kingdom as children again?
Okay, yeah, well, I've been fortunate. I'm now living in Israel almost 7 years. I've been blessed in that time, 4 grandchildren getting married. So I now have 10 grandchildren and 6 great-grandchildren. And I'm so glad to be in this program because the key question is, what kind of world are we leaving for young couples, for future generations? So that's why it's so urgent, and kudos for what you're doing and the million grandmothers, because if we don't have a vegan world, we're not going to have much of a world at all. You know, it's been warming up, and it's projected to get far warmer. The climate, the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is increasing. The seas are rising. The glaciers are melting, and more and more frequent and severe storms and heat waves and droughts and wildfires. So this is the essential message. This is it for, we're either going to have a vegan world or a mainly destroyed world, unfortunately.
Well, when Sailesh was crunching numbers, Dr. Sailesh Rao from Climate Healers, as a systems analysis, the founder of the high-speed internet, so he knows how to work with systems, that at the rate we were wiping out ecodiversity, wildlife, we would be done by 2026, hence his message, Vegan World 2026. And that's all doom and gloom. But we do know that veganism is on the rise like it's never been. I mean, veganism was coined in, I think, the 40s and 50s, and then it became more popularized maybe in the 70s. But it hardly grew in numbers. It was a very small group of people. Now we see veganism around every corner, and restaurants and social media. Yes.
Absolutely. And especially the young people, thank God, that are becoming vegan, more women than men. And I think they're seeing the climate threats. They're seeing more and more how horribly animals are treated. There's always a health issue, et cetera. And there's also the important issue of the usage of resources, because the animal-based diets are super wasteful of water, land, energy, other resources. So there's so many reasons to be vegan, and I've been, of course, pushing it. And by the way, one very important thing recently, because there's always one tough argument to answer, and that is, I know it's terrible for the animals, bad for my health, the environment, but what can I do? I just love the taste so much. But as you know, there's so many plant-based substitutes nowadays, and they say they have the appearance, texture, and taste so close to that of the meat and other animal products, people can't tell the difference. So this is my mission, I'm sure yours and the grandmothers, to get this message out. And I'm pushing and running for rabbis. I'm working with my group, Jewish Veg, and getting some newspaper ads out and just getting the message out in every way possible.
Well, thank you for your work, Richard, because I'm telling you, you are known everywhere in our circles of veganism, and you don't stop your advocacy work. You contact people, you're very proactive at saying, hey, can I speak? Can I share my message? Because there is a connection between spirituality and veganism. And once we go vegan, we start to settle down, and our connection with creator, with God, with Yod-He Wod-He, is our connection is in our silence, in our breath. And Gabriel says that eating meat is so stimulating and it's addictive. And eating flesh and secretions, we know, that casein, morphine in dairy is incredibly addictive. It's made, for the calf to become very attached to its mother, which they don't get to do because we take the
Right.
humans can drink. So we know that when we get the flesh and secretions out of our diet and eggs, we become more quiet. So we're able to feel what we're here to do. We're able to feel into our mission. Did you find that, Richard, when you became vegan, that you just were very much clearer on what you needed to do for the rest of your time?
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's a great feel much better physically, but also spiritually, knowing that this is the approach, this is the diet, this is what the diet God would want, because God wouldn't have want a diet that doesn't harm the animals. It says in the book of Psalms that God's compassion is over all his work. Jews, by the way, are supposed to be Rahmanim b'nei Rahmanim, means compassionate children of compassionate ancestors. And God, of course, would want us to be healthy, to have the best diet. And the environment that is so threatened with climate change and deforestation, and you mentioned before the species disappearing, and the soils eroding, and the coral reefs are being bleached or destroyed. So there's a spiritual element. I argue in my books that there's 6 Jewish mandates, and other religions, of course, have similar teaching. 6 mandates that point to veganism, the ideal diet, to protect our health, to conserve natural resources, be compassionate to animals, protect the environment, help hungry people, and seek and pursue peace. So these are things I try to spell out. And I'm happy to debate any rabbi, anybody else, and most of them are just ducking the issue. But fortunately, by the way, more and more rabbis are, and I'm sure other clergy as well, moving in that direction. Jewish Veg, probably in a month or two, is coming out with a statement signed, last I heard, by 150 rabbis, maybe closer to 200 by now. So, as he said before, things are moving in our direction. Hopefully, they'll be fast enough to avert a climate catastrophe. So, as you say, leave a habitable, healthy, environmentally sustainable world for all future generations.
Mm-hmm. And we still believe, right? We still are working towards that change. And I know that studying with, because I wasn't born in the Judaism religion, but studying with Gabriel, I had a huge teaching in that area, and I know how important the rabbis are in their congregation and with their amongst their people. And so it's kind of like when the grandmothers of the family, because grandmothers are held in such high regards, go vegan, they bring the whole tribe along. They say, I want my whole family to not have diabetes and all the diseases that come along with eating flesh food. And so when the rabbis in their congregation go vegan, their people will, follow. So it's a huge feat to bring rabbis on board, isn't it, Richard?
Oh, absolutely. That's why I'm writing an article right now, how rabbis can help save the world, because my 89 years, I've been in touch with many rabbis, and I find super dedicated people, and wanting, of course, Jews to live Jewish lives and do as many mitzvot of the commandments as possible. But the animal-based diets and the animal-based agriculture violate the 6 mandates I mentioned before. Again, taking care of our health, treating animals with compassion, protecting the environment, conserving natural resources, etc. So, rabbis should be speaking out about that, and I'm going to, of course, very, very respectfully, but a little bit aggressively, try to really push that idea.
And I'm part of a community called the Interfaith Vegan Coalition, which I know that you've spoke on, and they're also deeply connected with In Defense of Animals. And they are showing that in all of the teachings, in the biblical teachings and all the other teachings, it's the golden rule. It all comes back to the golden rule.
Right.
So it's all beings. And Gabriel often says that people have really misunderstood the word dominion. He says in the Jewish understanding of dominion, it means to caretake.
Yeah, right. To be stewards and
whatever you want
caretakers.
the animals.
Responsible stewardship. By the way, the proof of that, which I try to emphasize, that's of course in the first chapter of Genesis in the Bible, the Hebrew Scriptures, and shortly after that, this chapter 1 again of the Torah, verse 29, God's first dietary regimen was strictly vegan. So right away, that dominion is limited. And then in chapter 2, verse 15, it says, the human being, the first human being, Adam, was put in the Garden of Eden to work the land, but also to guard it. So I try to put out we're to be Shomrei Hadamat, guardians of the earth, co-workers and partners with God in protecting the environment. So absolutely, that dominion, and use examples of that, it's like somebody has a really big garden, but doesn't have the ability or time to take care of it. You hire a gardener, in effect, you're giving that gardener dominion, because he's going to do everything. But of course, that doesn't mean a carte blanche to destroy, but to plant when needed, to prune when needed, to do everything possible. And of course, as a grandmother or a mother, we know mother has dominion over the child, but there too wouldn't think of doing anything to harm the child. So there's many examples where dominion could be responsible guardianship, responsible stewardship.
Thank you. And what is your role in your family as a grandfather with your grandchildren and veganism? Are some of your family members vegan?
Oh, yep, absolutely. Wish not all of them, because it turns out, of course, I was like, I'm trying to think, wait a minute, 43 or so before I became a vegetarian. So some of my children were initially meat eaters and all. But I've got some grandchildren who are vegans, and a daughter who was not just a vegan, but almost into raw foods pretty much. But also, hopefully, they'll become more so.
So Judaism, the little bit I studied with Gabriel Cousins over a few years, it seems like the message is to live in joy. It's almost like one of the speakings, to not be depressed or give up hope. And so tell us a little bit about your book. Tell us how it instills hope in our listeners and the readers that will buy your book shortly, I hope.
Oh yeah, well, I want to show the book again, because what I'm doing, the issues are so important that anybody, thank you, anybody who contacts me, my email, and that's veggierich@gmail.com. That's VEGGIE rich, from Richard at gmail.com, and request it. I'll be happy to send a PDF of that book. I want to get to as many people as possible. Same with my book that's coming out later in the year, as I mentioned, the 20th anniversary edition of Judaism and Global Survival. And it makes a strong case that God would want Jews to be vegans, that it's certainly consistent with Jewish values or religious values. I mean, it says in the book of Proverbs that the righteous individual considers the life of his animal. In Judaism, it says that a Jew should not sit down to his or her own meal before making sure, if he has a pet, for example, that the pet is fed. And it's so important. It's part of the Ten Commandments. That's recited at Kiddush every Shabbos morning, where it says that not only human beings are to rest on the Sabbath days, but the animals are as well. And one of the great Jewish commenters says that means they should be free to roam in the fields and enjoy the beauties of God's creation. And as you know, the realities for animals are so far from those teachings. So that is the reality.
So it's bringing people back to the garden, literally. Your analogy of, when we give somebody dominion over our garden. So we were basically have been given dominion over the garden, and that we need to go back to eat just from the garden. That's it.
Well, absolutely.
Orchards, and let the animals be free. Leave them do what they're here to do.
Right. And actually,
go ahead.
I'm sorry. Actually, the messianic period that Jews yearn for. It's like Garden of Eden, Gan Eden at the beginning, and there too the animals were free, and there wasn't killing. Then, according to Rav Kook and other Jewish scholars, the messianic period will also be vegan, and he based that in the powerful prophecy of Isaiah, who said at the ideal time, a messianic period, the wolf will dwell with the lamb, lion will soar at the ox, and no one shall hurt nor destroy in all of God's holy mountain. So that is, we yearn for to get back to the garden, in effect, as some have said, and it should be a time of peace and justice and harmony and tolerance.
I am so ready to live in a world where we're back to the garden.
Okay, well,
How about you, Richard? Would you like to see that in your lifetime?
Well, we have to hope and pray for it every single day. That's like a Jewish mandate. But it's interesting. In Judaism, they say one thing that'll help bring that is to start acting out the conditions of that ideal time. And since one of those conditions will be vegetarianism, even more so veganism, by becoming vegan today, that will help usher in that ideal time.
Well, I used to attend a church quite often called the Center for Spiritual Living. So it was a non-denominational center of spiritual living. And we would end the prayer instead of with amen. We would end it with, and so it is. So that's what you're saying. Live as if it is. Live the way that you want to see the world. And then it goes back to the golden rule. The golden rule is powerful. I know Dr. Will Tuttle is writing a new book, and it's really a lot on the golden rule. His first book, The World Peace Diet, which changed a lot of lives and a lot of people vegan. And then the next is about that every message that we've been given is to live the golden rule.
No, absolutely. And that's in Judaism, right in the middle of the Torah and Leviticus, it says, let's see, do unto others as you would have others do unto you, basically, and love the neighbor as thyself. And also, there's a Jewish teaching that somebody came to the sage Hillel, sort of to mock him a little bit, and said, can you teach me all of Judaism while I'm standing on one leg? And Hillel answered, what you would not want done to you, do not do to your fellow human being. All the rest is commentary. Now go out and study that commentary. And there's an indication that that person was so impressed by that answer that he converted, and instead of being a mocker, became a Jewish supporter.
So what would you say to people that are deeply spiritual? They don't necessarily follow any, religious teachings. I think the time for separation in religious teachings is long over, right? Isn't veganism type of spiritual gathering in the truest sense of some sort? Because it seems like when I meet a vegan, we just understand each other on some level.
Mhm. Oh, I'd say absolutely, because it's certainly the most consistent with what God would want, with Jewish values, with values of all the religions. And when you see how horribly animals are treated, like you mentioned cows before dairy, but it's unbelievable that the dairy cows, as you know, is artificially impregnated every single year, and
Rape,
then
rape.
just so that they can give milk. And of course, the industry wants to sell that milk, so they take the calves away maybe within a day or so. And you have the mother and the cow, the baby, the calves separated a short distance, and for days and days it's just bellowing, and they can see each other, but the mother can't nurse and feel the baby and all. And of course, at the egg laying hatcheries, things are pretty bad too. The male calves, the male chicks are killed right away because, of course, they can't lay eggs and they haven't been genetically programmed, as the so-called broilers have been, to have much flesh. So they kill right away. And then the hens are kept in such close, confined compartments, they can't even raise a wing. And because of frustration, they tend to peck at each other. And the industry, instead of saying, well, we've got to increase the cage, we've got to stop thwarting all with their natural instinct, what they do instead is, in a very cruel process, without any anesthetic, any painkiller, they debeak the birds. So if they peck at others, it won't be as sharp and they won't hurt the other bird. So the whole animal industry is so horrible, so antithetical to religious values. So I agree with you that veganism is very close to spirituality.
Yeah. Well, one more question on this, and then we're going to talk about what we imagine seeing that we can actually end our prayer with it. So it is. I would like you to dispel the myth of kosher, because I've seen kosher slaughterhouses and they do not look very compassionate.
Mhm. Okay, well, especially nowadays, the idea of kashrut or the kosher laws were to minimize pain. That, unlike in most slaughterhouses, it couldn't be somebody who was just an immigrant, couldn't get another job doing it. It had to be somebody who was pious, would say a special prayer, and all. But now it's mass production, so it's not anything like where it should be. And the thing is very important is that even if the slaughter was minimal, hardly with any pain, you cannot forget the months and months before that where the animals raised so cruelly on factory farms. So, as again, the idea of kashrut was meant to minimize pain, but the ideal form of kashrut would really be veganism, because that would minimize the pain. And a lot of people say, well, how can it be considered kosher if it violates all the mandates I mentioned before about compassion and taking care of our health and protecting the environment, etc.? So that's part of an answer about kashrut or kosher laws.
Thank you. Thank you for pronouncing it properly for me. So let's leave our listeners with inspiration and possibilities. So give us some inspiration, Richard.
Okay, well, the inspiration is that thankfully the young people are really speaking out more and more, and that the message is getting out there, thank God, because of programs like yours and many others were able to get the message out. And I'd like to urge everybody viewing this wonderful program, and I thank you for the wonderful comments and questions, it's to approach their local rabbi, minister, priest, imam, and talk to others and all, because this is it. The world is so threatened today by climate change. We've seen what is happening with the temperature increasing just 1.2 degrees Fahrenheit since the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, projected to increase as much as 3, 4, or 5 degrees. This summer here in Israel, it's projected that 2 or 3 times we may have 3 days or so with 100-degree Fahrenheit temperature. And we're seeing that happening already in many other places. So again, I urge people to make this your issue, especially if you have children, grandchildren. I know you would do anything for them to have a decent future. And the most important thing you can do is become a vegan, or at least greatly minimize your consumption of meat and other animal products. But more important, get the word out as much as possible. Write letters to the editor, speak to your local clergy, and set up programs in your synagogues or other houses of worship. So these are some things that you can do.
And do as Jesus does, take it to the streets.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much, Richard, for your time and your work and your constant messaging to communities and your communities, and even the community that you're in that you say is not vegan yet, but you never know. Eventually they might all turn vegan. So
Right.
thank you very much.
Okay, many thanks to you for having me on this, and wish you much continued success. And I hope you have many others, I'm sure, will also share this very important, powerful, holy message.
Thank you, Richard. And I would love it if you wanted to end with a prayer.
If I would do what?
If you
Oh,
would
the
like
prayer.
a prayer.
Okay. Well, may it be God's will that we have a wonderful, peaceful, just, compassionate world where all the killing of animals and all the warfare ends, and that we be able, along with this wonderful group that Tammy represents, the grandmothers, leave a really healthy, happy, compassionate, environmental, sustainable world for all future generations.
Thank you.